Okay, so our guest today was super cool. He actually played the theme. Tell me something good. So he's already jacked up and ready. I'm super excited every afternoon to come to you, bring you my friends, people I know, people who will share what's happening in their industry, all the good stuff, what they're doing to stay sane. And very rarely, there's two rares here. Very rarely do I wear a blazer during this show, but my friend Lloyd here did. And secondly, we never have a Harvard. so, so, Lloyd, it's your chance to tell me something good.
Thanks, Steve. First of all, any conversation with you is a good thing. So it's already a good day in my books. So I appreciate the time. This has been unbelievable in terms of the last 10 weeks. Nobody could have ever predicted any of this. Nobody ever saw it coming. It's turned our world upside down in so many ways, and it's affecting everybody across the planet. So if you think about that, it's an incredible thing to have 7+ billion people affected by one issue. And so we're all literally in this boat together. Even though we already were in this boat together, nobody really focused on it. Yes, we've got environmental issues and we've got global warming, but nobody really got galvanized behind all those kinds of things. Now it's a matter of life and death with this virus. So in the last 100 years, which is the last pandemic, nobody's really been, not every person on the planet's been affected like it has today. So I think that that's something to really behold and to sit back and you kind of gasp and say, whoa, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means to me anyway. It means that, you've got to find silver linings. You've got to find the good things. I'm an optimist by nature. And so I got to continue to be optimistic because that's how I function. Otherwise, it's a problem, especially in places like today, in the environment we're in today. But there's a couple of things that I think have come out of this that are really going to be significant. If you talk about retail, you talked about fashion, you talked about leadership. I think there's a couple things. You saw, for instance, the NFL draft, right? And you saw the NFL draft, which used to be this big glitzy thing that they put on at some theater in Las Vegas or Los Angeles or wherever the case may be. And all these people are all dressed up and they all come on stage and they all give, Roger Goodell a hug and all that kind of stuff. And it's a huge event. It happened virtually and online, and it was a better event than any other event they held. Why? Because of the humanity of it. Because we got to be in people's homes. We got to see the coaches and the general managers' sons and daughters and grandchildren and where they live and where they sit and their dogs. Bill Belichick and his dog is one of the big great memes of all time now. But I think part of that also is it's also almost the death of workaholicism, as I call it. And because, there's more to life than this work and this grinding and all of this stuff that doesn't really matter. It's more about now family and connections and relationships. When you sort of break the social fabric, which this pandemic has because it's locked us all in, you realize how much you miss the social interaction and being with people and giving people a hug or a handshake or whatever the case may be. And so it's put more of a premium on that. So I think that one of the things we talked about a little bit previously is how I have a 23-year-old who we kind of airlifted out of New York City 10 weeks ago. And he called the place Wuhan, okay, if you think about it. Wuhan, okay. Because New York City was one of the hardest hit places in America.
Right.
And so we pulled him out. So he's been working remotely from here. When am I ever going to get the chance to spend 10 weeks with him under my roof again? Ever. I didn't think it was possible. So that's, again, another silver lining to this whole scenario that you didn't get those opportunities before. So I think it's a remarkable sort of pause that everybody's been forced to take and reevaluating all kinds of things. If you're talking about retail, I think it's a real problem. There's big problems. There were a lot of problems. Look, I think this virus has actually opened the door and exposed the fissures in society and in some of the industries and some of the companies that we're dealing with right now. It's not like they didn't have problems before this, but it just exposed it and accelerated some of it, right? So if you think about retail, my whole thing is there's got to be much more of a transparency in the supply chain. I think there's got to be a much more transparency in terms of pricing and costing and all the rest of it. And I think that there's got to be a much more cooperative environment between suppliers and the vendors, and suppliers and the retailers. And one of the things that I'm about to write a bit of a piece on that I post on LinkedIn all the time is the leadership of and I think if you think about leadership and you think about ideas and solutions to problems, it's not just one little solution that's going to have, it's going to take a combination of things, a string of things to be able to combine to resolve these complex problems now. So instead of leaders saying, okay, I need some ideas, and somebody mentions something and somebody in rebuttal, they say, but what if we do this? No, don't say but anymore. Say and. Oh, that's an interesting idea. And what if we tried this as well? Or how do we incorporate the two ideas together, right? So if you look at, for instance, Allbirds and Adidas, okay? Allbirds and Adidas are now collaborating on a new running shoe that's made with sustainable products and environmental sensibility and all that kind of stuff. And the CEO, Tim Brown, said, creating a future, okay, that's more about collaboration than about competition.
Wow.
And I think that's the big lesson here. I think that's the turning point. That's the tipping point. I think that's how we move forward. It's more about collaboration than competition. You think about the hyper-partisan, aspect of our society right now, the politically charged and the racially charged environment we're in. It's about collaborating. It's about understanding. It's about working together now, more than ever. In order, and it's not one person that's going to beat the virus either. So the virus needs global collaboration to lick it. And I think that that's part of the issue. The other thing is, the other example I'll give is, and this is Adidas again, so I give them a lot of credit. Remember Nike just came up with that ad, "Don't do it," after the murder of George Floyd. Adidas retweeted their tweet of that ad and said, you know what? We couldn't say it any better. It's time for unity. So those are the types of things that I look at and say, hey, something's happening here. Something good is happening here. So that's how I would term those things. That's what I look for.
Certainly something good. And, give people some background here. I'm usually the guy making introductions. I was fortunate to have somebody really close to me introduce me to you. Standard thing, at that time was let's meet for coffee. And I remember being so energized and so you're so thought-provoking. Share with the audience, if you would, what your background is and why you're qualified to be, this leadership voice of what's going on in retail and fashion.
I don't know. Well, yeah. It's for other people to think I'm qualified as opposed to I'm thinking qualified. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm a humble guy, so that's part of the issue. But I grew up in Canada. I'm Canadian, and so don't hold that against me. But we grew up, and I went to school at Harvard, as you mentioned, and then I got into the retail business. I opened my own retail business in Canada. We had 19 stores. I didn't really know what I didn't know then, and so I did the opposite. We sold those off, and then I actually moved to the big corporations. So I started entrepreneurial and moved to Gap. And so I ran the Canadian Gap business for almost 8 years, and we did very well. And I learned a lot in that time frame. And then since then, I've gone on to lead other organizations throughout Canada, the U.S., who are in all kinds of different stages, whether small, medium, large businesses, hyper growth, restructuring, reorganization, repositioning, rebranding, et cetera. And so the last few years, I've been doing that a little bit on my own with clients and those kinds of things, helping them think through problems and reorganizing and rebranding and those kinds of things. So that's what I've been doing. And I moved to South Florida in November. Great timing. The weather's been great. And then we got locked in. So,
Could be worse, though.
Could be worse. It's sunny today, so what can I tell you?
So, tremendous background, tremendous experience. I know that you play a role in the advisory cloud and all of those kind of things where people can ask you the burning questions that are going on. Can you give us a random sample of what people are asking, what the temperament is? What's the big, aha moment that people say, hey, well, LAP, share your knowledge with me.
I think that I go by two. I repeat this all the time. I go by two different. My basic leadership tenet is listen, learn, and teach. Okay, so listen, period, learn, period, teach, period. And so the first thing I would say to companies that are in trouble or have issues or don't know where to go or how to get there is, okay, do some listening. Or if you're starting a new job, do some listening. That's what you should do. God gave us 2 ears as opposed to one mouth for a reason. We've got to listen twice as much as we talk. So really do some deep dive listening. And I've got a great article here that I was just reading about called Better Listening is Fierce Listening. That means you're really active in your listening mode. You're understanding what's being said, how it's being said, the tone of voice, body language, as much as Zoom or any of the other platforms can now allow. That's the problem. Is part of that gets truncated a little bit because you're not feeling it in the room, and there's some feelings that you get in the room, whether it's tension or joy or sadness or some other kind of anger or whatever the case may be. There's that electricity you're missing. But it really is about and listening to what's not being said also, and being in the moment. I went to a conference when I was being developed as a leader at Gap, because as an entrepreneur, you're not really trained to be a leader of a larger organization. You're a smaller organization. So I saw myself on the stage as they were play acting something where somebody come in and said, look, I really need to talk to you about something. And somebody was on their computer said, yeah, sure, come on in, sit down. And they were continuing to do email as this person was talking. So the person left the office, and it struck me that was me. That was me completely. So you've got to drop what you're doing. You got to be in the moment. You got to be present for people like you are always. And I think that will make people, even though you don't act on what they say or take their recommendations or whatever the case may be, as long as they feel heard, then they're going to feel pretty good about it. That's all people want to do is be heard.
That's tremendous insight. One of the training modules we do is teaching people how to listen, because they're just not programmed to that. Most people are already thinking about the response as they're doing it. They're caught up in that. And so an interesting tidbit is that the same letters that spell listen also spell silent.
That's good. It's an anagram. I love anagrams. That's very good. There is a scale that we used to use in terms of, the listening scale, -2 to +2. And -2 is really about, teeing up your next point. Like you're not even listening, but +2 is listening to be altered. So if you think about that, if you're really open, listening to be altered, then that's where you break the breakthroughs. That's where you get the solutions. That's where you get the organizational, problem solving. And to be honest with you, with all of the protests and the demonstrations and the rightful indignation that's out there, if we learned how to listen to each other better, then we would be miles ahead of where we are. So now is the time to be listened to be altered. And that's really the message I think that we need to take forward.
I mean, Harvard was good because I've done 50 plus of these shows since the pandemic started. People have shared some great stuff. Nobody's gone down this lane, and I'm so thrilled that you did. One of the other acronyms that we made up is called WAIT. And I train salespeople to wait, because wait is, why am I talking? Shut the fuck up, man.
Right. No, that's true. And look, and so listen and then learn. You have to learn. You have to learn from that. So you have to be open to learn. So that's one of the things you're always learning, and that's part of being sort of an authentic and humble leader. Is you're always open to learning, always, and then your responsibility is to teach. So and I think that those things will always be true forever and ever. And I think the other motto that I play on that you asked about is thinking, feeling, and doing, because you've got to be smart about what you're doing and how you're approaching it, but you also got to feel something. You have to have empathy for what people are going through, put yourself in their shoes, and then do something about it. And I think now is a time that we have to do something about it. We can't just talk about it. We can't just feel it. We have to actually articulate and do something about it.
I love it. I mean, that's just in the few minutes we've been together, that thought leadership jumps out. So if somebody has a question for Lloyd, how do they get in touch with you? What's the process? Because I think our audience is going to wind up jumping right back at you and saying, hey, Lloyd, I want more.
Look, I'm accessible. I'm accessible via LinkedIn. I'm accessible by email, lloydperlmutter@gmail.com. I'm accessible by phone, 248-794-9673. I'm available. So I'm always available. I'm always open. I'm always on. And it's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so blessed that, I get, people of rich, like fiber, your DNA. The minute we met, this is the thing I miss, is that I'm meeting a lot of new people at scale, but nothing could have replaced. And it's interesting when you brought it up, and I want to talk about this in our final couple of minutes, but there was a chemistry that happened between us that you could not duplicate any other way. It was just like, I was doing, I took the meeting as, someone said, hey, meet Lloyd. Okay, great. I do that, but the minute you got there, I was like, this guy's different. Something I really, and we went and spent a long time together then.
No, we did. You gave me a lot of time there in your office, your quasi office there at the coffee shop. Yeah.
Which is gone.
I call it a throne. You're sitting on a throne. You're sitting on this big chair. This throne. The king of the coffee shop.
It's all packaging, man. This guy must be important.
I agree with you, and there's nothing that's going to replace face-to-face contact, and we have to get back to that as soon as it's safe. And that's why I think still business travel, there's still going to be business travel. There may not be as bigger groups, but I think it's important that I've traveled all my life. And you have to get in front of people. You have to be with people. You have to be present. You have to have that connection and that chemistry. And there's just no replacing it. So we're going to get back there sooner rather than later. And hopefully they'll find a cure or vaccine or something that allows us to feel like we can do that and not put anybody else at risk.
You are awesome. I knew you'd be a great guest, and cannot wait to share you with my friends and audience. Thank you for spending time with us. And if you ever need me, I'm right here for you.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
We'll be in touch.